This is May the 3rd, part 2. We had a little interruption there and I had to do another part, so please bear with me. As I was saying in Matthew 26, verse 18, Jesus was telling them, go into the city to a certain man and tell him that the teacher says, this is big, my appointed time is near. My appointed time is near. What does that tell us without the shadow of a doubt? The plans were set into place according to the scriptures exactly as they were predetermined by the Father as he continued to use the Son. In Matthew 24, chapter 24, I want to look starting with verse 23. We've talked about how the predictions were made, and we want to see what Jesus says to accompany those. In 23, at that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or wow, there he is, do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the very elect, if that were possible. See, I have told you everything ahead of time. What's Christ saying? When you see these things begin and continue, I've told you ahead of time. Who did he tell ahead of time? The people that were listening to him all the way up through all of the generations that sit at this table in my kitchen speaking. Hopefully, incidentally, we'll be back in the church soon if we can get this coronavirus, which I know you all are praying will pass over. We're looking in the book of John, chapter 16, and we are starting with verse 25 as he continues to speak to his apostles. Though I have been speaking figuratively, a time is coming when I will no longer use this kind of language, but I will tell you plainly about my Father. In that day you will ask in my name. I'm not saying that I will ask the Father on your behalf. No, the Father himself loves you because you have loved me and have believed that I came from God. I came from the Father and entered the world, and now I am leaving the world and I'm going back to the Father. Then Jesus, continuing in verse 28, then Jesus' disciples said, now you're speaking clearly and without figures of speech. Now we can see that you know all things and that you do not even need to have anyone ask you questions. This makes us believe that you came from God. Jesus responds to this and says, you believe at last? Jesus answered, but a time is coming and has come when you will scatter each to his own home. You will leave me all alone. This happens at the time of the arrest of Jesus in the garden, which we're going to look at shortly. When he was arrested, they all ran off, but Peter followed from a distance. He said, you will leave me all alone. But continuing in 32, yet I'm not alone. My Father is with me. And then he says in 33, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. We're now looking in Mark 14, and we're looking at verse 23. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or look, there he is, do not believe it. False Christs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and miracles so that they would even deceive the elect, if that were possible. So be on your guard. Why? Because I have told you everything in advance. Everything in advance. We know that when the rapture comes of the church, Christ is coming, 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18, and he's going to snatch his church up into the heavens in his presence so that we'll ever be with him. 7 years later, there'll be the second coming of Christ to earth, at what point he will stand on the Mount of Olives, and when he does, Everyone, every eye, everyone will see him, even those who pierced him. In Zechariah 12:10, Jesus writes through Zechariah the prophet in 600 BC. See, in Zechariah 12:10 rather, it foretells the second coming of Christ before he came the first time as a baby. And it says, they will see me whom they have pierced. In Revelation 1, verse 7, they will see me, every tongue will confess, every eye will see who I am, and they'll mourn for me like a firstborn son, the one that they pierced, the one that he speaks, me. I'm the one that was pierced. And in the first person, in Revelation 1:7, quite a contrast. How much time between the two? About 700 years. The same message before and after the coming of Christ, his death and his resurrection for our sakes. Why did we go over the same type thing 3 different times? Because today there are many people professing to be Christ. There are people that are putting out prophetic statements that are not true. There are many, many people who are perverting the Word of God and preaching things that they feel are better than what's in the Word. I won't go into particulars, but the sins of the fathers are showing up now among our politicians. We've got politicians that are willing to slay children. Our very own governor standing of Virginia and saying that we will take the babies and keep them comfortable until the mother decides what she wants to do, and then we can either keep it or do away with it. How horrifying. The LGBT, I will not go into detail. Those of you who love the word know what goes with that. I would like to take a moment to look at Judas. I think everybody in the world knows who Judas is. He betrayed Christ, turned him over to the powers that be during his arrest. What is incredible about it is in Zechariah 11:12 through 13, it forecasts that Judas will betray Christ. It even says how much money he got for it in Zechariah, and it was 30 pieces of silver. This is Old Testament fulfilled in the New Testament, and we will shortly look at Matthew 26 and 27. We're now looking at Matthew 26 with verse 14. It tells us, then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and asked, what are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you? So they counted out for him 30 silver coins. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Sold him out, told to us by Zechariah way in the past. Now we're going to slide over to Matthew 27. And let me find verse 10. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the money, the 30 pieces of coins, and the price set on him by the people of Israel. And they used them to buy the potter's field as the Lord commanded. This is an indication that, let's be reminded that Judas felt tremendous remorse after he had handed Jesus over. It hurt him so badly, he didn't repent. He went and hung himself. And when he hung himself, the Lord told us, Jesus, in John 17, verse 12, he had lost none of the 12 apostles that Father had given the Son, except for the son of perdition. And we're told, of course, at the Last Supper there, that Judas was possessed by Satan as he took off and took care of business, the business of the wicked one. I want to get in there the details of the arrest of Jesus. In the book of John, it gives the most detailed and one that is just tremendous to me. It's all tremendous, but this is particularly impacting. In John 18, starting with verse 1, When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples, and he crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They were carrying torches and lanterns and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. Jesus said, "I am he." There we have I am again. The I am who is the Father. The I am the same. The Father and I are one, John 10:31. I am he. So Christ right there affirms who he is. And Judas the betrayer was standing there with him. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell on the ground. The power of Jesus saying, "I am he," knocks them off their feet. They get up and straighten themselves out. And in verse 7, again he asked them, "Who do you want?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." "I told you that I am he," Jesus answered. "If you're looking for me, let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me," which we just talked about moments ago. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, and he struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. The servant's name was Malchus. We're told eventually Jesus bent over, picked up the ear, and healed him. In Luke 21:51, Jesus put the ear back on. Then in verse 11 of where we are, he commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" We're going to Luke chapter 22. We're going to start with verse 39. This includes Jesus' preparation for and the arrest that he went through. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down, and he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Here's Christ on his knees in his humanity, asking the Father to have mercy on him. If he has to go through this, he still certainly would rather not, but he will. Let's see what he says. Again in 42, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will," Jesus says, "but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. That happened when he was in 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. He strengthened him how? Not spiritually. He is God. He strengthened him in his flesh, in his body. He held him together. Does Jesus feel tremendous stress? He's anticipated it every day. In fact, from before the eternal place that he was with the Father before he created things. So the angel comes from heaven and strengthens him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat, like drops of blood, falling to the ground. When he arose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." While he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus asked him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" Still in chapter 22 of Luke, let's jump up to verse 66. At daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both chief priests and teachers of the law, met together, and Jesus was led before them. Well, he's already been through a horrific night. He's got no rest. He's been beaten and tormented, and he still is being led to the next chamber. It says in 67, "If you are the Christ," they said, "tell us." Jesus said, "If I tell you, you will not believe me. If I asked you, you would not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God." They all asked, "Are you then the Son of God?" He replied, "You are right in saying, I am." Yet again, that beautiful "I am." Then they said, "Why do we need more testimony? We have heard it from his own lips."